Hey guys, it's Tina and Chantel here. As promised, we're doing a Q&A today answering your birth-related questions. So I want to introduce you to Chantel.
Hi, I'm Chantel. I'm from Blooming Births and I'm a birth and postpartum doula here in Singapore.
So we're just going to jump right into it. I've got a list of your questions right here. So the first one is, what does a doula do? I think a lot of people were like, is that like the same as a midwife?
A doula and a midwife are very different. A doula is somebody who is, I guess you can call us like a coach, a support person, and we support a couple's journey mentally, emotionally, physically, and from an information perspective. We don't do anything medical, so like blood pressure, doing vaginal checks, we don't do any of that, whereas a midwife does. If you could kind of compare us both, a midwife definitely is more like medically centric as compared to a doula.
Is having a doula applicable if you're having like a C-section birth?
At the birth itself, you can't have a doula if you're having a C-section, or we call it like a belly birth. Sounds a bit more gentle. Belly birth. I will still encourage couples to have a doula because there's quite a bit of preparation to do before you actually go for the procedure.
Like before you go into like the operation room.
Yes. So there's still a lot of mental and emotional prep to be done. Definitely having a doula to prepare you for your journey into having a belly birth is definitely recommended. But having a doula at the birth itself, that's not possible unless you get like a special exemption
From the hospital. Yeah. Another thing I want to add is like Chantel, like she wasn't just with me on the day, like we've actually like met up, like we did sessions before, she got us prepped and she taught us about like how birthing actually works and also just like the emotional side, and we really dug deep. And so there was like sessions leading up to the actual day that I gave birth. So it's actually like a lengthy process. And when did I engage your services? Like a couple months before?
Quite early actually. I think you were probably just past your first trimester.
Yeah, so I actually started looking around and I just like Googled, I went on Instagram, I just like did a whole bunch of things, and then we actually had a video call together, and then I really liked Chantel's vibe. She's very calm, very easy to talk to. Then I engaged your services and we actually did like a lengthy process to like mentally and physically prepare me. Did any of your previous clients go through a stillbirth or miscarriage? If so, did you ever help them cope with their loss? Can you quickly just explain the difference between a miscarriage and stillbirth?
So a miscarriage is the loss of a pregnancy in the early weeks, so anything below 23 weeks. A stillbirth is basically a loss of pregnancy after 23, so 24, 25 weeks.
Onwards.
Onwards. In my journey, I've supported 3 couples. 2 of them were stillbirths, and I think it's hard because the family's going through, of course, this really devastating experience, and as a support person, it's like, oh my gosh,
my heart just sinks when I like think about that, right?
There's so much that needs to be done in a very gentle way. And I'll just give you an example. The client contacted me and said like, oh, our baby, we went for a checkup and our baby's heart was not detected. And we've confirmed that the baby is no longer. This mom was 5 months. And that's where I actually went down and meet with them in person and spoke to them about how they're feeling. So for me, the main thing is to zone in onto their emotional and mental state and just make sure like, okay, we have the time to grieve and sort of like process it as best as we can at that time. And then once that was done, we actually sat down and thought about like, okay, so when do you want to get this going? Because at 5.5 months, we actually have to deliver the baby. So the mom has to go through the birth process as well.
So she gets like contractions and everything.
Yes. So everything like that you have experienced. So she has to go through labor. So we actually talk about like, okay, when do you want to get it? Because they need to be induced. They need to have medicine to help them get the labor going. A lot of people think that, oh, we have to do it ASAP. You don't have to, as long as there's no like medical need or any complication. You can still take some time. I believe like people should have that time to just grieve.
Yeah, definitely.
So once that's done, then we actually walk through the process of like what to expect. I was their doula at their birth as well. So helping her through the contractions and how to move and how to breathe and giving them that moral support. We also spend a bit of time kind of talking about the aftermath. What do we want to do? We talk about how we can advocate for ourselves in that moment, because some hospitals, they have a time limit for how long you can hold your baby. And then some hospitals are like, you hold your baby until you decide that, it's okay.
Yeah.
So we go through that, like what's gonna happen once the baby comes out, and just bond, the three of you bond together. And then we think about, hey, how do we want to preserve the moment? Like, do you want some pictures taken? I think having like footprints and handprints done is really nice. We prepare all of that prior. And then we call funeral services, kind of just get like a timeline of what they can expect,
So
how much
literally
it costs.
everything that comes after you go through with the couple.
Yeah, and then on that day itself, it's, being the contact person, like calling. For that, we also sit down and think like, okay, what do you want to put in the little box? Some parents write letters, they put in like toys and stuff like that. And then so once that process is done, then we go through like postpartum healing together as well, because the body is still...
Yes, you still have to heal after that.
Yeah, and you actually produce milk. People don't realize you produce milk. So to help them as well, like what do they want to do? Some women actually remove that milk and give it to their firstborn, or like they take medication to kind of dry out the supply. So we go through that, and then it's really a lot of like giving them time and space to grieve, and sometimes it's just sitting with them and hearing.
Wow. I don't know, I got
That was
goosebumps, and I was like so sad just thinking about it, because it's like both emotionally challenging, and then physically you have to go through labor, you have to heal, and then just deal with all this. And it's good to have like a person like you, because you're the one calling the funeral services, you're the one liaising, and then the parents can actually have time to spend with their baby.
I think when it comes to stillbirths and death, it's still a little bit like taboo. I find like people don't really know how to handle it, and sometimes the clinics are not very compassionate. So I just want people to be aware as well. Like, I think we're not there yet in terms of being compassionate.
Yeah, it's just more like this is the logistics, and this is what we're gonna do, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, I feel like we need to pick it up and like have something happy after that. But I'm like, this is a question from me, but how many births or how many women or mums have you supported?
So I've been doing this for the last 4 years. In terms of births, I have supported over 100 births. But if we're talking about not just birth and postpartum journey, like over 250 families.
Wow. And that's considering like COVID happened as well.
So not just in Singapore, but globally as well, more in the APAC region.
This is a good question. Everyone tells me not to wash my hair after birth. Did you wash yours? Is this an Asian thing?
Kind of.
I think so. I've heard of like people saying don't wash your hair. Apparently it's really bad. Like it will let the cold like air or the wind in you, and then your body will be weak. I washed my hair. I totally washed my hair. Must be a really old school thing when they didn't have hot water and a hairdryer or something.
And
Get
they
a
had
Dyson.
to like, of course you don't like have like wet hair and like walk around, like dry it, and
don't sleep with wet hair kind of thing.
It's totally okay to wash your hair.
I mean, I'm fine. I'm still alive, guys. So we'll see. What are some advice you would give someone who wants an unmedicated birth, but doctors would most likely push to have drugs involved?
Change your doctor.
That's like a good point, because whoever you go with, I guess you got to know their style, right?
Yes.
Or like what their practice is usually about.
Let's just say every doctor operates differently. So before you actually choose your doctor, you really want to go and find out. And I encourage you not to put down any deposits, because some doctors, they have like packages where you put like an upfront fee to it, because the last thing you want is to put the upfront fee and then you find out halfway down the line, you're like, oh, this doctor's actually not very supportive, and like, oh, you've got like a big sum of money that's stuck there.
And then you feel like you can't leave, and then you're like unhappy.
Yeah. And you should never feel bad. You should never feel bad for wanting to change doctors, because it's your birth experience, it's something that you want. So finding that care provider is the first step. And it's okay if you have to see like Dr. A, Dr. B, Dr. C. It's really fine.
Yeah, you got to shop around for your doctor.
Yeah.
I got this question a lot, actually. A lot of you guys wanted to know like where I got the list of things to pack in my hospital bag and what useful things did I actually use and stuff. And actually the list that I showed you on my vlog was from the Blooming Births like book. Or maybe we'll make it downloadable for you guys, because it's actually a lot. And I liked that how you listed it was like things for the mum to pack, things for partner to pack, things for the baby, like things for the healing. So that was like in different groups.
Yeah.
And what I did, I just put everything in like Ziploc bags and like label it and everything. And so it's actually a lot more useful. And another tip that you had on there was to like, for me to lay everything out and then for Alfred to pack it in like the bag so he knew where everything was. Because if I'm on the bed and I just gave birth, the last thing I want to do is get up and find like my breast pad that I need or something, you know. So Alfred, he was in charge of that, and I think that was like a really handy tip. Get your partner to pack all the stuff in the actual bag. What are some techniques that we have that you can use to cope with the pain during labor?
There's a lot of things that you can actually try. The first place I would start is your breathing. Breath is everything. Breath is key.
Yes.
So if you go on the internet, right, there's like all kinds of breathing, you know, like
I was really confused actually, because there were so many like different versions of this breath, and then the different breaths to do at different times as well.
So the key really is long inhalations and long exhalations. And then when it comes to the bearing down stage, then that's more of a, you know, you want to kind of project that breath downwards.
It's like
to the perineum.
Like pushing that
so
down.
very simple. You can just breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 8 seconds. Now, of course, you know, you've got no space in there, right? So go with what your body feels. So if you can breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 6, that's good enough. If you can't get to 8, that's completely fine. So the first place I would start is your breathing, because your breathing would then regulate. It's kind of like when you go running. If you're like, you're not gonna keep
You're gonna
going.
puff out.
Yeah, you're gonna like, ugh, right? So it's the same kind of theory you apply to birth as well.
And then we had some like random tools. I don't know if you saw in like in my birth vlog, but Chantel was like doing this twisty thing with her rebozo around me. We had a wooden spoon. It was funny because she was like, Alfred, do you have a wooden spoon? He's like, yeah. And then Chantel was just at the back. I don't know what she was doing, but it worked, because every time I had a contraction, she would kind of use this as like a little lever to tighten the scarf like around me, and that would like squeeze my hips, and it would feel so much better because that would like relieve the pain when I had a contraction. But this was handy.
I love the wooden spoon. Like it's a really cool trick I carry it in my bag. So basically, when you're having a surge or like a contraction, the ligaments get pulled. So when you do counter pressure, when you squeeze, you're kind of shortening the length that the ligaments get pulled. So that's why you feel that comfort. Now, of course, you can use your hands, but we want to work smart in labor too. Like if you have a doula or like a support person, that's great. But if it's just you and your partner needs to pace himself too. So by using the wooden spoon, instead of like squeezing the hips, you use the wooden spoon. It's not so tiring for the person doing it as well.
Yeah, that's really handy. So guys, wooden spoon. I used a comb during, like towards the end. I was like, do you want the comb? Because like I was screaming and like it was just getting like intense, and he was like, oh, I bought the comb, do you want the comb? And yeah, it helped because like when I squeezed onto the comb, you feel like pain, but the pain compared to down there was completely different. And I guess like I focused on this sensation a lot more than down there.
Yeah.
I should have had 2 combs. I should have had 2. Like, if you're gonna try for a natural unmedicated birth, just get 2. Just 2.
Yeah.
And then we use the TENS machine.
Yes, the TENS machine.
Someone was like, what's that device that you keep looking down at every time?
I usually get the moms to put it on, because when the surge comes, then they can like, and then they can increase the intensity.
So that's what I was doing. That's why I was always looking down. Like when a contraction would come, I would like press the levels at the intensity up. And so that sensation would like take over or kind of get my mind off the pain. And so then I turn it down when it's gone. So it was useful, and it's good that I can control it too, because imagine I was like, oh yeah, can you turn it on?
Yeah.
It would just be like just a hassle. And then also like you stuck the little pads on like on my back.
So there are actually 4 pieces that you stick on the back. And what I really like about the TENS machine is it's a really good tool to help you cope, especially if you're like in a taxi. Because in the taxi, you're very limited with your movements. So you can't really like, go on all fours, or you're just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
And then I find like the taxi ride or the car ride is one of like the hardest, because you're like, oh my gosh.
I hated that.
Yeah, so the TENS machine is really helpful. I would say like, layer your comfort measures. So like layer the stuff that you're going to use. You don't want to like bring on the TENS machine immediately. You want to start with like, okay, breathing, and then like let's bring in the comb, let's bring in like the rebozo with the wooden spoon, and then let's do the TENS machine. So we're always like going one step at a time to cope with the sensation.
Yeah. So this, what does this actually do? So it's sending like little like
Pulses,
yeah.
that kind of like redirects the pain receptors. It kind of like blocks it a little. It's the same like theory with the comb too, where we redirect that sensation.
So I remember it feeling kind of like zappy, buzzy, kind of like little, I don't know. It was just like this buzzing sensation on my back, and then when I turned it up, you can definitely feel like it's a lot more intense, and it's almost like stimulating the muscles.
Exactly. So that's what it's doing. That helps to kind of like redirect away.
How do you know what the mum needs and when? Because you and I didn't say like, okay, like, oh, I need the next thing, or like, you just knew, and then you're like, okay, I think it's time to go to the hospital. Like, Chantel, I don't know, she like read my mind.
Observation, like really looking at the mother, hearing her. Sounds a bit weird, but smelling smells too. Not that I was like actively smelling Tina, you know, but the fluids that come out.
Oh my god, can you tell?
Birth has like a certain smell, like when the membranes come out, and I don't know how to explain the smell.
I didn't know this. I'm so surprised.
So it goes down to like observing the mother, right? Like when labor first starts, like if you notice, you were very upright. You were like standing and moving around.
I was
and
eating, I was chilling.
Yeah. And then as labor started to progress, you started like leaning, right? And the sounds that you were making were very different. Your facial expression was very different. So those are like the signs that we pick up for. So partners, I would say like tune in and observe your partner, because you know, if she's like frowning, if she's making certain sounds, if she's licking her lips, like there is a reason for it. When Tina starts like licking her lips, that to me is an indication of, oh, it might be dry. So then I just give her water instead of like, do you want water? Are you thirsty?
Yeah, she didn't ask me anything. She was just like, here's water. I'm like, yes, I'm actually thirsty. Like, how does she know?
And I guess what helps also is prenatally, when you journey together with the couple, you get to know them. That gave me an idea of who you are and what you need and what you didn't need.
So postpartum care, does it hurt down there after you birth?
Does it?
It's swollen. It can be painful, especially if you have a lot of stitches. For me, like my tailbone really hurt. The other thing you have to deal with is all the blood. You didn't have your periods for 9 months, and like, surprise, you're gonna have it for like 4 to 6 weeks, and it's like a lot. It's like bright red as well, and so I feel like that's a little bit like, oh, like, but yeah, it is a little bit tender, not gonna lie, but it didn't last for too long for me. How long do you have to wait to have sex after giving birth?
Technically, there's no waiting time. Of course, you want to heal, so about 4 to 6 weeks. I would say go with how you are feeling, because you just gave birth and then you're breastfeeding. So you may not feel like you are in the mood.
Yeah, it's completely fine if you're not in the mood.
And so then we start looking at intimacy in a different way, you know. It doesn't have to be penetration. It could be like, I don't know, doing the dishes.
Oh my god, that is turning me on. Like, that's my foreplay. Like, do the dishes.
The chores, you know. I think if you're not ready, you're not ready. So communicate that to your partner, and you can just start with like hugs and kisses and touches, and then slowly, as you feel like, okay, you know, let's try. And I have the urge, you know, and go ahead. And a lot of people actually think about like, oh no, my stitches, like, can we, you know, like, oh, is it gonna pop open again? Like, when your doctor clears you, like more or less the stitches would have been gone and healed.
I mean, I haven't had sex since, so guys, I can't, you know. And like, I don't have the urge. Like, you're honestly so tired, and I don't think Alfred does either. And plus, like, the baby sleeping with you. And so I remember Alfred was like, I was just thinking about it the other day. It'd be so wrong to do it whilst Lila's right there. And I just burst out laughing, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
Zen has a really good question. How do you become a doula? Is there like a school, a course you do? How do you get certified?
The world needs more doulas, by the way. So
I agree.
There's actually quite a lot of different schools out there. Most of them are based overseas, but there are 2 institutions, one called Childbirth International, so CBI, and one called Doula organization. There's exams and quizzes and essays that you have to write, and then you have to actually support a few births and postpartum clients and document it write a report and then submit that to the institution. If you pass, then you get certified. They actually call you for an interview as well.
Okay, so there's actually like
proper,
certifications, proper
yes.
courses you got to do. You can't be like,
No.
I'm a doula now. I'm a doula. I've
Yeah.
been through birth. Like, I think I can support other people now.
Yeah, you gotta get certifications.
What happens when you poo during birth?
A very common question that a lot of women tend to ask, and they do feel embarrassed.
Yeah,
if
I
they do
definitely
poop.
was. I was like, I don't want to poo. I don't want to poo. I don't want to poo.
Well, the first thing I'd like to address is it's completely normal to poop in labor, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And if you are afraid, prepare like a spray bottle of water and like essential oils and get your partner to spritz the room. If
Just
you
mask the smell up.
Yeah, if pooping in labor is very normal because as the baby is coming down, it actually pushes on the rectum, which then, you know, if you've got stuff up there, it's going to come out. And so sometimes when a woman is like, oh, I feel something, and she poops, and I'm like, yay, because that means like baby's low. But in labor, what happens is your midwife will clear it away. She's not just gonna leave it there and like baby goes ploop, you know, onto the poop. But nobody's like, oh, mommy, you've pooped. You know, nobody's gonna do that. So it's like very like hush hush.
Wait, have you ever had like a mum poop like during a water birth?
We have a fishing net where we fish out the poop. Yes, we do that.
That one you can't hide. If I'm in the tub and then someone's just like got this like little goldfish scooper thing and it's just like, hurry, it's like circulating, floating away. Oh gosh. I think you'd be in so much like pain and you'd be focusing on other things than the floating poop. How would you describe the pain of labor and can you rate it?
It varies for every one of us. It starts off like a tightening sensation, or like for those of you who experience period cramps, it kind of feels a bit like that. And then it progressively gets stronger and stronger. People get that thought, right? Like, wow, like I'm in pain, like, oh no. And subconsciously, we associate pain to something that's not right, right? Like we associate...
No, something's wrong, I'm hurt. Like,
yeah, and blood as well. So, but in labor, it's the complete opposite, right? The stronger your surges are, which you had it in your head. You're like, oh yeah, it's getting more intense. Like, yes, I'm gonna meet my baby soon.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's a good thing. It's just like, it's normal. It's not like I broke my arm, like that kind of pain, like that I'm panicking. It was just more like, this is the process. This is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then like also when I had these stronger contractions, I could just feel like blood coming down, like a lot of liquid. And then normally you'd panic, right? Like if I had my arm cut open, you'd be like, we'd all be panicking. But in this case with birth, you're like, oh, it's normal. This is good. This is good. And so like I had that in my head. But yeah, I think it's really important for people to like have that association when it comes to blood and the surges.
Yeah, and then birth partners, when you're supporting your birthing warriors, if you see blood and you're freaking out, freak out inside.
Do it internally.
Your partner's gonna look at you for reassurance.
Alfred was really calm. I remember
was.
when my water broke and we took a photo of like the liner and we're like, oh, it's a bit pinkish, and Alfred was like, yeah, I think this is good. Like, and then he actually got like the document. I was like, oh, if it's green, then go to the hospital. If it's clear, I'm like, okay, we're in the clear. This is good. Like, it's like you're doing good, because you had told him like, don't freak out if you see like the bloody show or whatever. He was really calm.
Yeah, he was really amazing.
Oh, what would you rate the pain out of 10? But as you said, it kind of it builds up. So it's not like a 10 straight away. It's like a 2 at first or something.
And it's also very subjective, right? My 5 could be like somebody else's 2. I don't like to rate it with numbers. I like to rate it with like, oh, it's mild. Ah, it's getting stronger. Ooh, it's quite intense. Wow, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
That's how
actually,
I like
that
to
was
rate
another thing. Like during my birth, we didn't use certain words, like the negative words, like pain, like you associate like pain as something bad. We're just like, oh, it's strong, or like, oh, it's powerful. Yes, it's intense. In your book, you actually had like a list of replacement words to use. And I think it actually really helps because in your mind, it's viewed differently. Like we didn't use like contraction. It was like a surge is coming, a wave is coming. And so we didn't use the word pain. And I think like someone in my last like Q&A video, they're like, oh, it's not painful. I'm not saying it's not painful. I just don't, it's not that the same sort of painful as like breaking your arm. It's just like a sensation that's so intense that
Yeah.
I've never experienced. Like now I don't even associate it with like pain, you know. So it's like, it was like a really strong sensation.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know what it is? It's like having the urge to poop and then having like the world's biggest stomach ache at the same time.
Yes.
Like just ate something really bad and you really got to go, and no matter what, your body's pushing this thing out.
Yes.
That's the closest thing I can say. Like it's comparable to.
Yes.
What is the white layer on the baby?
So that's called vernix. It looks very like cottage cheesy kind of texture. It's really good for your baby, and it's actually quite good for you too.
I actually put some on Alf under his eyes.
Yeah. If you think about it, like when we go into water, if we soak ourselves for a really long time, what happens to our fingers?
We get all pruny.
Yeah, very wrinkly, right? Baby's submerged in the belly for a very, very long time. That vernix actually forms and it kind of coats them. So in a way, it prevents them from becoming wrinkly.
It's like
So-
waterproof. Like
Yeah, so it actually protects their skin, and when they come out, it contains like good bacteria too, you know, as the baby passes through the birth canal. So that vernix, it's like nature's moisturizer
Yeah.
for the baby.
How long did you wait until cutting the umbilical cord?
Ideally, the longer we wait, the better. So there's this thing called wait for white. When the baby is born, the umbilical comes out. It's very pretty, it's very curly, and it's like purplish blue because it still has the blood and the oxygen. But once all of that gets transferred to the baby, it actually becomes white. So that's when you know that, oh, everything
All the
has been
blood's gone,
transferred,
yeah.
and it stops pulsating. Ideally, we want to wait for white, but in a hospital setting, sometimes we don't have that luxury of time. So I would say if you can give it like a good 3 to 5 minutes, 5 minutes if you can, that would be great, because that's where we can get most of the blood and oxygen back to the baby.
Did you enjoy the experience? I've been debating on whether I want to do a natural birth or use medication. I would say yes. I think like when people ask me how my birth was, I said it was amazing, it was incredible. And then they're like curious, you know, like, oh, why? And I guess like I had done all this preparation prior and associating like the birth with meeting baby. It was just like, yeah, of course. Like, it was like such a good experience. And because I didn't have to have any interventions, I didn't have to
Yeah.
resort to like medication, even though when we discussed this, I was like, I would love to just try the gas, you know? But unfortunately, when you do have a water birth, you can't have gas. And I didn't know that. I was like, well, okay, it makes sense. If I'm like walking to the tub, I should be like mentally all there, not like
Yeah,
all
high.
over the place. Yeah, but I was like, oh, I could have got high for free. And I would have loved just to try it, but I was like, okay, well, it was fine. How I view it, because I labored for 10 hours, I was like, that's a good work day, you know? And if someone told me that, oh, you just had to go through like 200 contractions and you'd meet your baby, I'd be like, yep, I could do this. It was just very doable compared to like now when you have to take care of the baby. That's the hard bit. And then like learn how to be a parent. I feel like that's a lot harder.
Yeah, and I think it really goes back to the most basic and primal thing, which is trusting your body, right? Why do we have these fears? It's mainly stemmed from the influence of external factors, of like videos that we watch, stories that we hear. I mean, if you've always been hearing, wow, my birth was really painful and like, ouch, and oh my gosh, then that's the expectation that you have built in your head too, right? It's going back to the self, it's going back to the body and just really trusting that, hey, like I can do it. Like, why would we doubt ourselves?
That definitely helps because, you know, at the end of the day, whatever you tell yourself, you know, you end up believing. And then, yeah, it's like that trust that you have. Do you need a shave down there before giving birth?
Not really.
Not really.
I guess it would be like how one would like it.
So you can just have full view of everything.
But the only time where they do shave is if it ends up in a belly birth, then they
Ah.
kind of have to like shave the top because that's where they do the incision.
But with vaginal birth, you can just...
No, just,
Oh, okay.
just leave it if you want to.
Did you find it hard to breastfeed at first? Yes. It was a little bit hard. It was just like a learning curve. Like it's a skill you gotta learn and the baby's learning. It's trying to get into the right positions. But we had some practice like with like your baby doll beforehand. And then the whole latching thing, if you get it wrong, your nipples become cracked and sore. But even though like they do become sore regardless because it's like constant sucking on them every 2 hours and you gotta apply like loads of nipple balm and oh, that's Thank God my nipples have toughened up since then. But like the first like 1 or 2 weeks, it's really hard. When you first breastfeed as well, I remember you feel like, I started feeling like
The uterine contractions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's like I just gave birth. Why am I still having contractions? It's like another sort of pain, but that does go away as well.
So what happens is when the baby latches, the body releases oxytocin, and oxytocin is the hormone that causes the uterus to contract and expand. And what that does as well, it's also helping you to, bring it from like this size back to the original shape. So that's where you feel the surges, or rather the contractions. And for second time or more mothers, it tends to be a bit more intense.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
There is no expectation for you to like breastfeed now and like,
to like nail
be
it
really
first
good at
go.
it. Yeah, exactly. Take the time, because your baby is also learning. So it's giving your body and yourself the opportunity, but also giving your baby the opportunity too.
What are some tips for handling back labor? First, let's just talk about back labor. Actually, at one point, I don't know if I was experiencing back labor. I did feel like a lot. Okay, not the back, but it was more like my behind. Did I have behind labor? Because it was on my butt. Like that's what the sensations were all there. Why is it like at the back and not the front?
Most of the time when you have back labor, it's because of the positioning of the baby. The baby's trying to come through. So as the baby rotates, so baby rotate in a clockwise position. So at some point as it rotates, depending on, the position, the shape, it can kind of push onto the sacrum, and that's where you experience that sensation of like, wow, my lower back's just so uncomfortable, especially if baby is in a posterior position, like the back of the baby's head is facing the back of the mom, and so that can be a little bit more uncomfortable. In those times, like heat is really helpful. Like
the rice sock.
Yeah.
The rice sock, guys.
The rice sock, or like a heat pad. We did some exercises, remember, like shake the bum,
my favorite
and the inversions. In cases where there's a lot of back labor, I would encourage you to do some of those exercises too, kind of just to relieve. And if it's like a mild positioning thing of the baby, then some of those exercises can try and like turn the baby out a little bit.
Did your body go into shock after delivery? I've heard sometimes your body starts shaking after birth. I didn't go into shock, but I was shaking because I was cold.
Yes.
Because I had the water birth and had been submerged, and so my bra was like wet, so I was like shivering a little bit when I was on the bed.
It can also be called postpartum chills. So the hormones, right? There's like all these changes in the body. So there's like this endorphin release, this rush. So that also causes the body to shake. If someone has had an epidural, then yes, that's kind of like the side effects from the medication where they start shaking and shivering. I guess it also depends on the type of birth. If it's a very traumatic labor and birth, then shaking is also the body's way of like releasing that trauma. Yeah.
How did you feel mentally after giving birth? For me, first, and like immediately after, it's like euphoria. You're like amazing because like you've been pregnant for 9 months and you finally get to meet your baby. But then mentally, like it gets maybe like a week after. I'm normally such a chill person, but I remember like Alfred and I, we would kind of like have these little arguments, and it would just be something really silly of like, can you dress Lila? Can you pick the long sleeve one? And he's like, I don't like you telling me what to do. And I'm like, wow, and then I would start crying. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm just trying to help. And then I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, is this postpartum depression? I'm like, is this depression? Like I'll just break down in the car, and I'm like not normally like that. So I feel like I had a bit of like the baby blues, because it did go away after like the second week. And when you're sleep deprived and you're tired, you're healing, like little things can just trigger you, and your hormones as well, they're out of whack. And so for me, like I did have those moments, and like I still have hard moments now, but I know like it's just different. Like I know it's a part of it, not like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm so depressed. It's a bit different.
That few weeks was also a time where you readjust as like husband and wife to mom and dad.
Alfred and I, we never fight, and to fight over something little, I was like, oh my God, this is how it is. And imagine like so many couples would go through these like hard moments. It really tests you, really does.
And it's harder when you're not aware of your own triggers. And it's harder when you and your partner don't have, you guys don't communicate well, or like there's room for improvement.
Alfred would try to get me comfortable, but there's only so much he could do, right? Because like the baby's hungry, so I'm like, I gotta get up and I gotta like feed her every 2 hours and I can't sleep. I found that I started comparing how much I did compared to Alfred, and then I was like, wait, why do I feel like this? I'm like, oh, like I'm always doing more, I'm always the one getting up. But then I had to like kind of stop myself and be like, hey, this is just like a part of it. Like he doesn't have boobs, so he can't do this. I would communicate that and be like, okay, so I'll help with this speed when she's able to take the bottle and stuff. So, you know, like before I wouldn't have these problems in my relationship. I wouldn't ever feel like I was always the one doing more, or like feeling I was less appreciated. But you do like find yourself in these moments sometimes.
For sure. It's like it's a mental load of motherhood. Yeah, but I like the way you handled it. I like the way that you two kind of danced with it too.
Okay guys, we've come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for answering all these questions and then taking the time to film this video.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed the questions.
If you guys have any more questions or if you want to find out more information, you can head to Chantel's website, Blooming Birth. I'll leave the links and stuff below, as well as her social media and TikToks. You have like really funny TikToks that I find hilarious, especially the pooping one.
Yeah.
Go check it out. I'll leave all the links below. But yeah, that's it from us. We shall speak to you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.